Nematombo, Nondo, Mr. Playboy, Stunner, Batai Hanna, Batai Hanna, Batai Hanna, Batai Hanna. Mwenda mberi, museamwa, otiziva, moyo nishu, matemahiva, mwendisoko, mokuye mukono, sinyoro shumba. Esai kushura baba, aiwa uko makata, masha wedu apasa, sika usati warasa, rija waka chonjoma, pamsora iba na mama, gashirambe wazama, sika kunyora sama, gatsimbise ukama, musaputse sasanda, une wako nkazana, mungwe chete pasana, piti kanana, mwenda mberi pachana, naziva tasangana, seha matawanana, takapira kare kushitaura, ngati chengete itika zedu zechivan, waka uya waka zishora, wona nasa tiseserivan, uya nehanda nakakuvi chidzoka nasu kutiseva.
Hi there, hi everybody, wherever you are, all over the world. My name is Savannah. Now, today on our show, the Savafe Show, which we bring you every week, and in the hopes that we can connect people of African descent wherever they are in the world. We are going to reach out and we're going to travel all over the world and connect as a people. Now, what we're trying to do is have a conversation in our own voices and try to figure out what it is that connects us as a people. I know we are scattered all over the world, but what is it that connects us as a people? Is it music? Is it culture? Is it languages? What is it? Is it in our DNA? We need to find out that. Now, let me introduce you to this week's guest, Professor Evelyn Laurent, and we are going to have a conversation about Africa and Africa diaspora. Welcome, Evelyn.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your program and for opening for this conversation.
Yes. Now, as we start this conversation, you're a professor.
Yes.
But I know you're more than a professor, which is the reason why I'm going to call you Evelyn today.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Evelyn, how and what does Africa, or being an African person, or an African person of a person of African descent, mean to you? I mean, I just on a personal level.
How many hours do we have?
We have 1 hour.
Okay. It's been, and thank you for that question, because being a person of African descent, it's a very significant experience. It is significant because the way people look at you. It is significant because of the learning process that you're going to go through, especially if you're growing up in a nation where Blackness is not, or Africanness is not perceived as a norm, as a majority. So since you are a child, by the time you arrive in second grade, the latest, which means that you are 6 years, 7 years old,
yes,
you will notice, you will begin to sense that your being is being questioned and under attack. Of course, as a child, you don't have the vocabulary to even begin to say that. You just feel there is something different. And of course, that then leads you to begin questioning a lot of different things, which you might carry with you and develop and explore, or you might hide and bury it, depending of the social pressures and depending of what the environment is forcing you to comply with. Growing up in Latin America, in Venezuela, where I was born and raised,
yes,
there is very little space to converse about Blackness. It's changing, but when I was growing up, there was no space for that. So
Okay.
I should let you know that I was born from parents from Haiti
Yes.
who had migrated to Venezuela, and that my first few years of my childhood, though I was in Venezuela, I was born. I didn't even speak Spanish. I was most of the time in nearby other Haitian immigrants who
Yes.
also had children, like in my cohort, and so we didn't speak Spanish. We only spoke French. We were not supposed to learn Creole yet because Creole is the language of the adults. And
Yes.
so my introduction to Venezuela began when I went to kindergarten. That's when I began, or maybe a few months before, because of my neighbor. I had a neighbor who was, his parents were from Spain, and so that's when I began to see beyond the enclosure of the
Yes.
Haitian community that lived in Caracas at that time. Caracas is the city where I grew up.
Okay.
Yes,
So
being a person of African descent is central, and it guided me throughout all my life. And when I had the opportunity to travel and to go to Africa, I seized upon that, not knowing that in my family, some people have done it in the past. My dad
mhm.
cousins who lived or were like the cultural attaché for Haiti in Senegal. I have an uncle who did all his career with the FIO in then was Dahomey, now today Benin, Madagascar, Senegal. And so I kind of follow the trend of my dad's side of the family. Of my mom's side of the family, I learned when I was in Mali because of my mom's last name, Sila,
Yeah.
that the Tarakole in Mali, they have a majority of people with last name Sila. So
Okay.
there is a
Okay.
direct connection as well. So,
Oh wow.
and that experience marked me in ways that I can talk to you forever, and I will never finish explaining you what did it mean for me to live in Africa. I can only tell you that led to my career change because then I was a biologist, and I'm a
Oh
historian.
wow.
Yeah, now I'm a historian of the African diaspora. And since those 2.5 years that I lived in Africa, everything that I've done has been around Africa and being a person of African descent. So that those 2 years took my life and flipped me inside out. And in the journey once experience as growing up as in the diaspora of reclaiming and embracing that African, that blackness, those 2 years in Africa was the crown. I mean that after that I felt a completely different person, much more empowered, much more proud of who I am, much more happier also, and also it clarified a lot about Africa because growing up there was absolutely nothing that was taught or referred
Yeah.
to Africa besides safaris and wildlife.
Yeah. So I wanted to I wanted to stay on this, but also just because of what you just said right now, I want to jump into this question that I was going to ask you later, because I hear that in the American academic system there is a distinction between African studies and Black studies.
Uh-huh.
What is the distinction, and how does it affect our understanding of maybe us as a people or Pan-Africanism consciousness?
Yes, in the United States there is a boundary. Let's put it this way,
Yeah.
and it's a sad boundary, but nonetheless the boundary exists, and the boundary is a result of a lot of the, I would say, systemic insidious violence that have existed throughout the experience of the diaspora.
Yes.
So the department in in U.S. university, the departments that study the experience of African Americans, people who are descendants of those who were enslaved and brought to the United States,
Yes.
and that experience is enclosed into departments usually called Black Studies. It is
Yes.
important to know that those departments came to exist pretty much after the civil rights movement in the 60s. So they are relatively recent. Black HBCUs, or historical Black universities and college, have
Yes.
had those departments for a long time, perhaps not even having to call them Black Studies, because the universities were created to welcome students of African descent who could not enter other universities. Now, that is one thing. Then there is Africana departments that usually have a more Pan-African reading into it, and incorporate some of the knowledge and wisdom and knowledge and wisdom and episteme, as the academic says, of the entire diaspora. There is also African diaspora programs. For instance, the PhD that I have is in history of the African diaspora. And in my university, where I did a PhD, which is New York University, I had a choice to focus my attention to a particular geographical area. And I was interested in Venezuelan history, so mine is Latin America and the Caribbean. Nonetheless, in my program, I had to take several courses about Africa because that's the other point of departure. Most of the programs that dwell with Black studies begin with the transatlantic trauma of the slave trade. Whereas, for instance, Africana and African diaspora, for us, history begins in the continent, in Africa. And so, because regardless of what people may or may not go back, return, connect, whatever, our history wasn't cut in the Atlantic. And the fact that there is so much African cultural elements in the Americas cannot be covered, it's like a sun. And so we cannot be without what our ancestors were in the continent. And also, I always say, I am because some of my ancestors chose to survive.
Yes.
Many people committed suicide, and I respect that. I'm not going to blame them. But those who chose to believe that things could get better, well, I'm here thanks to them.
Yeah. Now, let me say this. In your experience in the colleges, how involved are the students or the academics of African descent, and how do they relate to the concept of Pan-Africanism? Do they, in the colleges, with your experience? Because I'm very curious. The young generation.
The student generation, it's hard to generalize. It's very difficult because for some students, the experience of live within a body read as Black is painful.
Yes.
And it is painful for everybody. You just have to go. So as I said before, you begin to make choices at a very young age. And depending who is surrounding your environment, your choices might go one way or the other. I was very fortunate. I grew up, I didn't know that until later, with books by Cheikh Anta Diop in my house, because my father came in a family who was a very proud, educated, intellectual Black family from Haiti. And therefore, there was no antagonism or anxiety with the experience of being of African descent. And so when I finally went to Mali and saw the mosque of Djenné and actually was able to get in, I didn't realize that I grew up looking at the picture of that place since I was a toddler. And so my choices were towards exploration. The fact that I volunteered to go to Africa, in and itself, speak of that curiosity and that thirst for knowledge that I had. So what I encountered for some people, the experience has been mostly about pain and not about a path towards self-love and hate. And so some students avoid taking courses on African diaspora and Black studies.
Okay.
Thinking of students of African descent. Those who actually looking into it, they embrace it fully, and they like, how come I didn't know? Usually it's how come I didn't know. And at least how come I didn't know, I find it from students of African descent. And also I have given talks at schools. I like to give talk to elementary and high school students, and usually the teachers are present. which are of different background. And the same thing, they're like, how come we didn't know? And so there is a huge void out there, even though nowadays information is at your fingerprints because Google has so much, it has a lot of distortion. But if you look carefully, you're going to find a lot of videos, conversation, discussion through which you can enlighten yourself. Yet, this is a I don't like to generalize, but because of it being so easy, at times it's harder people getting there because of fear and apprehension and so on. Now, there is a group of people who are very moved into Pan-Africanism and are looking for, but there is still a lot to overcome vis-a-vis the pain. Plus, there is a lot of misinformation about what is Africa. A lot of misinformation. I mean,
yes.
My two daughters went to a good school, and 1 year in third grade, I used to study this is a particular school because every year they study 2 different countries in the world. The United States pre-education system does not teach geography. None. A little bit of US, but very little, but they do not have an understanding of the world. And so this school used to teach them 2 countries per year, so the students could have some. And so 1 year was Russia and Kenya. And so they did the first part of the school year, Russia, and they were going to start with Kenya. And the teacher sent a memo asking us to begin looking at Kenyan wildlife. I had a fit. I got so angry. I was fuming. So I wrote to her an email, and this is a woman of African descent. I mean, she was an African African American teacher.
But she can only teach what she knows.
One, and it's also the fear of confronting. And so I wrote to her, I said, respectfully, I just want to tell you that I'm sick and tired, sick and tired, sick and tired, and sick and tired that every time we have to study Africa, we're going to wildlife. And I told her, listen, and I have a degree in wildlife management. It's not that I don't care about wildlife, but if you were interested in wildlife, how come you didn't ask us to look at wildlife in Russia? Huh?
In Russia, we were looking at the people.
They were looking at the music, the culture, the sculpture, the art, the music, the language, the song. I mean, about the culture. And so I told her, I will make sure that with my daughter, we look into recipes, we look into music, we look into the art of the different groups who live in Kenya. We try to assess music and dance. We try to look into clothing and textile. We're trying to look into the languages, the way Kenya is politically divided, a bit of the history. And then, if I have time left over, we will go into the giraffe. And not only that, I decided to join the curriculum committee. And that came up again. And the teachers were like, but what was your problem? And I'm like, sweetie, Africa is not animals only. There is, I mean, the wildlife is amazing. It's beautiful. I'm not going to say no. But I mean, have you looked at wildlife when you study China, Mexico, Japan, and Russia? So if we're going to do wildlife, we do it for everybody, which is cool and nice and beautiful. But if you're going to look into culture, music, food, art for everybody else, and then when you arrive at Africa, you're going to skip that, what are you teaching subconsciously to everybody here? And they were like, oh, we didn't think about it. I said, of course you didn't think about it, because you've been conditioned to think of Africa in terms of just, elephants and monkeys. And so, and then I told him, do you know that Nairobi is the site of one of the main players of the UNESCO, one of the main site of the UNESCO is in Kenya? Do you know that Nairobi is a full-blown Western city? They're like, no, we didn't know. And so at one point, the teacher said, well, let's talk about what the American kids have and the Kenyan kids don't have. And I say, listen, then you need to do the way around. What does the Kenyan kids have that the American kids don't have? Oh, is there such a thing? And I'm like, how dare you to think that you have something that somebody else lacks? Could you think that they have something that you don't have? And so she said, what do you think? And I said, well, I haven't been in Kenya, so I don't know
Yeah.
I cannot assume that everything is like Cameroon. Plus, Cameroon in on itself, even though it's a small geographic country, it has 280 different languages. And then the landscape and the cultures and the food and everything changes as you go from south to north or vice versa. And so, but one thing I've learned in West Africa, not that is applied to Kenya, but perhaps it does, when you are in a village where there is no electricity, on full nights in West Africa, there is a humongous party. It's an event. And it's so amazing because you are strolling up and down the villages until 3 a.m. There is drumming, there is dancing, and this only happens because there is no electricity. So this is only in remote rural areas. And that party, that celebration is out of this world. So kids, at least in West, and I kept telling her, West Africa, I mean, between Cameroon and Kenya, you have to take an airplane and fly several hours. But I imagine that perhaps in the remote areas where there is no electricity, there is the same sense of community building in which children learn from storytelling, from dancing, from drumming, from those who are out there. And I told him that this happened every 28 days.
Yes.
So, and for me, it's a festival that happens every time there is full moon. And she was like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." And so, yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Because you're talking about that, we completely haven't even touched. There's something that I wanted to ask you because of your very personal experience. Not only did you then change your life according to what you're saying to focus on African studies, something must have happened. Now, what I want to take you back to is this. When you were growing up in Venezuela, or when you then left Venezuela, imagine the first place you came was the US?
Yes, when I left the second time, first I went to the United States. Yeah.
Okay. What were the biggest misconceptions that when you first then went to Africa, you were shocked?
I was to tell you, for me,
yes.
The first things that shocked me were the similarities with Venezuela. And I can tell you the first thing that blew my mind. I was working as a biologist, and we were looking into how, because that Cameroon has a law that villages cannot exist inside national parks. So all the other parks in the north, they took away all the villages. And I was working in a national park, but it's in a rainforest in the south that had been created like 15 years before. And they wanted to help the communities relocate outside, which still hasn't happened. This was in the early 90s. And so we had to carry meetings with different villages. And then one of the villages is very close to the border between Cameroon and Nigeria. And we had to walk, and it was a very long walk the whole day. When we got there, they gave us food. This food is a mixture of black-eyed peas that's been pounded and several times and mixed with smoked fish with a boiled eggs, has been wrapped in plantain leaf and has been boiled. And it has palm oil. And they call it their coqui. And if it's with beans, it's called coqui bean. And if there is made with corn, it's called coqui corn. So we were giving coqui bean. And the moment I put it in my mouth, I was like, oh my God, this is like ayacas. Ayacas is a traditional meal that we prepare in most of the Caribbean nation. I thought it was only Venezuela. Now I found it's Trinidad, Panama, Puerto Rico. So everybody has their own variety. And usually in our societies, it's done around December, Christmas holidays. And then it hit me. Of course, Evelyn, who were the one who were cooking? It wasn't the white women, the wealthy one. I mean, what part of the culture? They were African women who were cooking. Not only that, listen to this. I learned to cook this because this is something that most Venezuelans learn to cook. And as a child, my aunt, from whom I learned to prepare that, who tell me that you have to dye the oil red. You have to make the oil red. And I always ask her, what's the point of making the oil look red? I mean, and because it doesn't really change much of the flavor, it's just a thing to appearance. And she was like, you know, to make it look good. Okay. When I was in Cameroon, the oil that is used is the red palm oil.
Red
And
palm oil. Oh
yeah,
my
and,
God.
yeah. And then I thought, oh my God, this is out of this world. And so that was one. The second thing, and so because I didn't know much about Africa, but I
Yeah.
didn't have I had not I was more curious than thinking this and that. I must say that I was really impressed when I saw Lagos because that's a metropolis. I mean,
Yeah.
Lagos is bigger than New York City and
It's
is
a city. It's a modern city.
yeah, no, it's a complete. And so, but to me, the surprises were the similarity. The second one was to find we in Venezuela, when you are in the circle and you want to signal something and you are not going to use the finger because it's a bad habit, you do it with your lips. You can tell, look at that person. And in the US, everybody thinks that's funny that we use our lips.
Yeah.
In Cameroon, everybody do that. Everybody. And so when I saw people using their lips, I was like, oh, that's two. That was two.
Number two.
But then the thing that crowned it for me, the shock, and that's when I thought I need to find out a bit more about this. I was living in the Anglophone part of Cameroon, and my English was okay, but it wasn't that developed. And I had lived a year in the United States, and the sense of humor is very particular of a culture. And so I had tried to translate some of the funny thing because in Venezuelan societies, humor is part of the everyday. You are constantly joking, and some of the jokes have a double sense, and
I think it's an African thing.
but it's always a sexual innuendo in your conversation. So you play with words, and there are some words that the words don't mean anything, but the way we use them and by the intonation, you know that you're talking about something else.
Yes.
And whenever I tried to do that in the US, I was told it doesn't work. No, we don't play like that.
You can do that in the US, but
you cannot do that. And so I thought, God, this English language is a mess. Well, one time I was sitting with a group of colleagues, my age, young people. At that time I was younger. And all of them were college educated, like in forestry, in biology, in conservation. And we were having beer and we were talking, and here came the humor. And it was the exact same of humor that I was used to. But hey, it was in English. And so to me, that blew my mind because then I realized that it wasn't the language, but it's the culture.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and of course, I was laughing myself out. I had tears, when you're laughing and you
and you're crying and
I had never laughed that much in English.
Yes.
It happened in Cameroon, in Africa.
Cameroon.
And then I realized, but this is the same way we play with the language. And so that was the third major shock I had. And of course, when we party, we dance until like 3, 4.
Yeah, I mean the music. So, which is another question that I wanted to say. So, in all this, what role does music have?
Oh, central.
Yeah.
Central. And that's the thing that I even found a music genre in Cameroon called merengue. Dominicans play merengue, but don't tell Dominicans they're Africans because they'll get angry. Some of them are recognizing that, but not everybody. But music is central. And you see, and that's a big difference between the United States and Latin America, both Brazil and Spanish-speaking Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps because African had been in Iberia for more than 700 years with the Moors. The Moors came from all backgrounds in Africa. And they were not only North African because the Sahara was never been a wall. People have gone up and down.
Yes.
So perhaps they were comfortable with drumming because I haven't read anything about it. But that's my only conclusion why they did not forbade Africans to play the drums.
Yes.
So for Latin Americans, music and drumming is part of our everyday. To the point that I went to a concert 3 years ago by a Peruvian family, And I was surprised that they incorporate a lot of the Afro-Peruvian music into the repertoire, even though they themselves are very indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the director, and she said, we cannot separate that.
Yeah.
At this point in Peru, it's very difficult to separate indigenous music pure from African, because it was mixed for so long that is almost fused together. And so while some people will tell you that the culture is not political, in Latin America, and I will also say Brazil, the music that has a strong African element, has served as a constant reminder of that, what many people perhaps are afraid or don't want to accept, but it's there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there. And now I realize that I was supposed to look for a clip, and I owe you that clip, but I will not know how to make it. There is a documentary that was put together by Afro-Venezuelan. His name is Jesus, nicknamed Chucho Garcia, Jesus Garcia. He put that
Mm-hmm.
together in the late.
Maybe the guys in the studio can find it. What documentary is that?
I don't think it's on available online. It's called.
Oh, okay.
It's called Salto en el Atlántico, Jump Across the Atlantic. And this
Okay.
is preliminary research he did with people in the Congo Angola region. And he found the parents of some of the Venezuelan African drumming. And so, and then he has in one scene of that documentary, he has a screen of the people playing it in Angola, and half of it is people playing in Venezuela, and it's the same. It's the same rhythm, it's a different language, but it's the same set of instruments. Just to give you an example, like that example, you can actually go all the way from South America to Mexico or back, and you're going to find all sort of music styles that are 89%, 90% African, if not 100% African. I mean, I imagine that in Cuba, for instance, so many of the prayers in African-based religions are still sung in Yoruba. So music is the central element, and it's a way where if you're looking for and you could not find, there you're going to find it. Yeah.
Okay. So because my thoughts as we continue to talk right now, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break and just watch something from our sponsors. But while we do that, I want you to think of this. We, as African people of African descent, we now very much varied. There are some people that you can't identify using the skin, which I think is a bad way of identifying us. When we come back, let's talk about what is it that is common in all of this that we have seen, and that probably we can use to identify ourselves more than the color of our skin, because that leaves me very uncomfortable.
That's a beautiful question. Yes.
All
yes.
right.
Yes.
We'll be right back, and we are just going to watch something from our sponsors. And welcome back. Now, please indulge me. I really feel very uncomfortable when we continue to talk about Black people as an identification.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, one thing before responding your question, that with the whole transatlantic trauma and the enslavement of African and the devaluing and the stripping of dignity that enslavement wanted to accomplish, the world vision of African has been distorted. And the world is still hijacked by that perception of negativity towards Africa as a continent and its children and grandchildren. And so, one thing for me that is the camaraderie, the sense of friendship,
Yeah.
the sense of fun, the spirituality.
Yes.
And the spirituality is very important that I stop here because sadly, the expansion of Christianity and Catholicism was at the repression of indigenous on the other side and an African religion on the other side. And so they were presented as demonic, devil worshipping, or fetishism or anything like that. And to this day, people still repeat that nonsense. And then is perceived as being African is a childlike who doesn't have an inner life or can't develop a holistic ontological development of the self. And that is extremely problematic because then it prevents the majority to even imagine or conceptualize the possibility of an African wisdom, philosophy, epistemology that not only that can be shared, but has been shared with the world. We are conditioned to think that the Enlightenment is entirely European, when Europe wasn't never into a cocoon. And like a friend of mine says, who were the one thinking about concept of rights, freedom, equality? The ones who were actually denied all that. And so for us, more than the skin color,
Yeah.
is the way of living, the way of supporting each other, the way of interacting with each other, the way of having fun, the creativity. One thing that hit me also when I was in West Africa, in the so-called Western world, so-called, because what I just said, we pay to go to a theater.
Yes.
We pay to go to an opera.
Yes.
We pay.
Everything is commercialized. It's about money.
And not only that, it's confined to a space. If you cannot afford paying, then you cannot get in.
Yeah.
And I mean, to discover the richness of the storytelling, going back to the full moon nights, or any social interaction, any graduation, any birth, any funeral, any burial, any death celebration, was a moment to perceive acting, dance, music, a concert. So it didn't have to be enclosed inside a box called theater for some and not for others, because that's the other thing. Once you're enclosed and then you have to pay, not everybody can pay. And it alienates, because some people are going to say, well, I don't even going to like it, so why am I going to pay for this? Or so, and that was another beauty that I'm like, okay, this thing actually originated in a much different setting, because it was for everybody, without having to call it socialism or capitalism or anything. It was
or anything. Yeah.
It was something that was part of nature. When I was in Mali, in Timbuktu, I stayed with a woman from there. We didn't speak same language, but she had a neighbor who spoke English, who was the high school English teacher. And so they arranged to have a griot come and entertain me. And even the griot didn't speak French or English or Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
The griot came every day or every 2 days to entertain me. And that was part of the work of this person did for the community. As an exchange, the community helped the person with food, paying for the bills or whatever, taking the doctor. But I thought it was so magical, because this griot person, she didn't say it was a woman. She didn't wake up and say, I'm going to be griot. She came from a family in which this wisdom was passed from generation. And so I would like, but as the thing, it comes with knowledge. Knowledge is power. The more misinformation exists about Africa, less we can learn, understand, and embrace and celebrate and respect what Africa has offered and continues offering to the world, because it's not dead, it's not over. And that's the thing to me also has been is that
yeah, but we speak of Africa as if it's something that needs to be preserved, something that is dead.
But it's not, because it hasn't stopped. The other thing, it hasn't stopped. It continues to produce, and people think of it as this, this old archaeological stuff as the only thing, without understanding. Like, wait a second. And so when I was in Nigeria, I had the opportunity to visit the Department of. I visited the University of Ile-Ife, which is one of the most important universities in Nigeria from all point of view, and I visited the Department of Art. I was blown. I mean, and I went to several galleries also in Lagos, because we tend to think of, we have a very tiny, teeny, weeny perception of what is African art. Not understanding that African art has never been stagnant. And it doesn't have to be stagnant. As same as music, African music. There are some traditional, but there is stuff that keeps growing and emerging and flourishing and creating anew. And so all these processes of creating anew, quite often is filtered, and it does not reach across. I can tell you that I came to see my first African film when I was in New York. I was 30 years old. I had never seen Africa. I didn't even know there was an African cinematography.
Wow.
Yeah, to tell you, I mean, and music, African music, I mean, African music producing Africa. It was through a friend from England who at that a long time ago made a cassette, because I told him that I had never heard African. This was before I lived in Africa, and he made a cassette.
Yeah.
When I was there, I mean, of course, I mean, at that time, this is a cassette just before CD.
Yeah.
I would have bought 10,000 cassettes, and I would have never covered half of what is being produced.
Yeah.
And we're talking about time of cassette. Nowadays, the production is out of.
It's out there. The internet has opened it up.
Yeah, no, it is completely open. There was here in Philadelphia for the first 2 years I was here. There was a concert called Africa Fest. They stopped it. They didn't get more funding, but they will bring about 5 to 10 African musicians and Caribbean to play together in a whole day festival. And I was able to see people from Madagascar, from Senegal, from everywhere. And not from everywhere, from several countries, not from everywhere. But that was amazing. And while I was traveling again, I told you I was in Cameroon, but then I went to Equatorial Guinea. I went to Nigeria.
Let's talk about that. Sorry, I had to interrupt there because you keep dropping all these countries, and it's just blowing my mind that you've been to so many countries in Africa.
Not enough.
I mean, they are 52, for crying out loud. I don't know anyone who has been to, even I from Africa, I haven't been to as many, but let's talk about that experience for you.
Fascinating. I was in Cameroon for most of the time, but then I went to Equatorial Guinea because I wanted to see a Spanish-speaking place in Africa.
Yes.
I was sad not sad because of the people. People are amazing, but because of the political situation.
Yes.
And the fact that nobody cares.
Yes.
Or those who cares are helping maintaining the system because Equatorial Guinea has a lot of oil. Let's not talk about that. But that's just, I want to drop that. Yes. Nigeria, I fell in love with Nigeria. Nigeria is a rough country, but it's fun. It is, you have to learn to navigate Nigeria, but it's great, it's fun. I met amazing people. I met friends who I'm still in touch with. And I was in the Igbo side, I was in the Yoruba side, and I went to the northern side. It doesn't mean that there are 3 ethnic groups, but those are the 3 majority groups.
I know.
And there are different things and different places. But Nigeria, to me, is an amazing country. If you tell me you have to move to Nigeria tomorrow, even with all the problems, I will move to Nigeria tomorrow.
It's so fascinating, right? So
Yeah, in Ibadan, I felt I was at home. Plus, I met a family who took me in as a niece. I mean, they were like my uncle. Yeah, and
Have
so
you done the DNA
I haven't.
searching thing?
Not yet, not yet. I'm
Okay.
about to do it. But I know. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know
I
what
was
else
just
I'm going
curious.
to know, but I know. I mean, when I was at that family, actually, I met a friend who now his mom is from UK, that is a Nigerian, and he had gone to do studies in Nigeria, and then their parents met and they lived in Nigeria for a long time. And he was born in Nigeria, and then but I met him in Calabar, which is on close to the border. And when we met, people who saw us meeting told us, "Gosh, you guys look as if you're family."
Yes.
And yes, and he's a person that I haven't seen in a while, but I know that whenever I see him again, and his father and his sister, it is like family. And it's
Yeah.
not that it is like, it was family, because he told me, if you have to go to Lagos, better stay in Ibadan, and then you can go from Ibadan to Lagos to solve, because I had to I had to get a passport, new passport, and there was no Venezuelan embassy in Cameroon, but there was in Lagos. And so that was one. When I fell in love with the tie and dye, to the batik. So I met a woman who was an artist, and so I spent with her like 2 weeks learning how to do things and getting to know her better. It was like being home in some ways, like a different dimension of home.
Yes.
Then from Nigeria, I went to Benin. I wanted to go to Benin because a lot of people supposed to have come from the Congo Angola region to the Americas, but according to Haiti, at the end of the 18th century, many people were coming from Dahomey, from Benin. So I wanted to go to Ouida. I wanted to set foot in the places where some of my ancestors may have walked. Of
Yes.
course, I don't know which one, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, does it? That's what I wanted to find out.
Yeah, no, it doesn't
Does
matter.
it even matter?
No, it does, because as I said, I mean, I haven't visited enough African countries. I mean, if I were to find that I came from, I don't know, Senegal, that would not take away my desire to go to Zimbabwe, to go to Ethiopia, to go. I mean, my desire is not circumscribed to a nation state. In addition, because the nation states in Africa, as we know, were decided by Europeans in the Berlin.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I mean, that in itself has a problem right there. Then I went to Benin. It was an amazing experience. It was before they had that whole thing they have right now in Ouida. At that time, they only had a concrete cross.
Yeah.
And I wanted to walk from the place where those who were going to be sold walk to the shore. Now, I am a person who when I see the ocean, I want to jump in it. When I was in front of that one, I couldn't. To me, that was waves and waves of tears.
Yeah.
That was the sadness of everybody. And the young man who walked with me, he realized that I was in France. And he was like, "Okay, I'll come back later to pick you up."
Yeah.
And he realized that I had tears. I mean, I was like, and I went to Calabar, I went to Badagry in Nigeria, I went to Ouida. Later on, I've gone to Ghana. So in Ghana, I went to Elmina and Cape Coast. Because those are places of pilgrimage. I mean, I don't need to know that my ancestor was there. I just need to know that many people who suffer and endure this horrendous crime went through. I would not say that, oh, that was somebody else. No. I don't need that. No. And so let's see, I went to Niger, which is very different because it's a Sahel. Once you cross close to the Sahara, then it's a very different Africa. Not that everybody looks the same or do the same. As I told you, Igbo, Yoruba is the same latitude, but they are different. They're different cultures, different fashion styles, many different language, food, diet, or whatever. Once you go to the Sahel, then it's a completely different story. Then you have different peoples also. There were times that I was confused. I thought I was in a National Geographic magazine.
Yeah.
The beauty and architecture, everything changes. I mean, whenever you
is the influence also from whatever country that came in and colonized becomes very different.
Yeah, the pattern is that the nations that had the British presence seems to have had more autonomy. and because of the way the British dysfunction in their own colonial system. The places that were ruled by French usually have very little roads, little modes of transportation, and very little infrastructure. But people are the people, and so
Yeah.
it's always the beauty of discovering the richness of what the people can offer, and that experience was unique. I mean, I learned about polygamy from women married in polygamous relationship, and people, when I talk about that, they like, you got to be kidding me, because the assumption is that it's automatically bad. And I'm like, I'm not going to say it's bad or good. You just have to look into. And
The way it is.
yeah, I met women in polygamous relationship who perhaps had not had formal education, to
Mhm.
doctors or lawyers, and they all one of them laughed at me so badly. She said, "Yeah, you guys and your monogamy crap." And she said, because this was in Timbuktu, and she lived in Bamako, in the capital, and it was during the school year. Her mom was seriously ill, and she said, the only way I can come be with my mom and my kids are in school is because I have a co-wife. If I didn't have a co-wife,
Wow.
freedom. And she said, I don't understand how come you guys don't understand that this is freedom for women. And so, and she said, I can travel whenever I want to go. I come by myself. I don't have to drag my children with me. And whenever my co-wives needs to do the same, I'll do for them what they did for me. And I was like, wow.
I guess the co-wife here, the modern co-wife, is the babysitter or the.
They help each other. And of course, like you said, there are frictions, there are tensions, but you manage through that. And it was beautiful to also understand how there is no one way of doing things. I actually have a friend from Senegal, and he said that everybody he knows who married into monogamy divorced. Everybody who married into polygamous relationship, everybody's married and everybody's happy. So, but when I say that here in the classroom, I have had Africanists who are from here and study and have gone, you're wrong. I'm like, you know what? I don't know if there is right or wrong, because you have to grow up into it. But what I've heard from all these women is this.
Yeah,
And I'm just sharing you what they say.
what they say.
I don't
Yeah.
have no right to say what they say is wrong, because I'm not living their lives.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
there was fascinating, because I went close to the Sahara. I arrived
Yeah.
to the Sahara by camel, and
Oh wow.
yeah, it was
That is amazing.
yeah, and spent the night there one night, and saw it getting really cold, and saw the sunrise, the sunset and the sunrise, and understood why all the major figures of religious background, I mean, like all the big, went to meditate to the desert, because in the desert,
Mhm.
the only thing you can do is to think about how puny you are.
Yeah.
And
You,
so,
you must have written books about this.
not yet.
Are you kidding me? You
Um,
haven't written books yet, or you are planning to write books?
I'm writing my book right now, but the book I'm writing is about the research for history. But once that book is done, I do want to write, because and then again, we don't dream about doing these things, not
Yeah.
understanding all that is out there for us to live and to experience and to meet people. And
Hmm.
so when I went to Mali, I was blown by the whole, like, Mali itself, its music. I visited the Dogon Falaise, the cliff, talked to people, talked to women, talked to, at that time, there was a movement by students, high school students. So I ended up meeting a lot of the high school students who were dreaming of democracy, discussing with a very sophisticated discussion. That's the other thing, going back to the assumption that African are these baboons. No, no, no. These were young, very intellectually developed, young, mostly boys, guys. But because it was a very Muslim society,
Hmm.
it was a thing that I was too free to be in touch with the girls, although I did socially.
Hmm.
And at that time, the language wasn't there, but it was fascinating. And then I went back few years after to a conference in Cape Town, South Africa.
Mm.
That was an experience.
How was that? Because
Whoa.
I mean, just the difference. Just can we talk about that? Can you first of all tell me your experience in South Africa, and then try to tell me what differences or similarities you found?
Well, the South Africa was a very short experience.
Yeah.
It was in Cape Town. Cape Town is, when we stayed by the University of Cape Town, which is by the waterfront. That tells you that we stayed in a very artificial, very white area of Cape Town. But I flew in after a very long trip, and we had to go to an opening for this conference and went to have dinner at a restaurant at that waterfront. And I felt so uncomfortable because of the power dynamics, the skin color power dynamic, and the history, that you didn't have to look for it that much. There was a beautiful mall there, and the mall had all sort of fancy stores. And God, the customers were mostly white South Africans. The people serving at the front desk at the bars were colored, and everybody who was cleaning was black. And so that was
tight. That was tight.
Oh, that hurt.
Heartbreaking. Yeah, you can't help to notice that.
Yeah, it was a big conference, and the majority of people who attended the conference were of African descent, or Latino, or even white, but who are people who know, because it was in connection with a program that supports students of African, Latino, and indigenous descent.
Yeah.
And we all had a nerve breakdown. I mean, it was tough.
Yeah. That was heartbreaking.
And and then you got on the bus, and then you drove for hours and saw townships that never finished, basically. And we were told that the unemployment among Black Africans was 80%, where it was zero among whites. And that in and on itself, as the data, and at the same time, the keynote speaker on the conference was the Reverend Desmond Tutu. And at the same time, meeting someone so radiant, with so much light, sharing so much love, knowing, I don't know what he's gone through. I don't.
Yeah.
And
we can't. Yeah.
No. And then going back to the whole issue of spirituality.
Yeah.
Being able to survive everything he survived and still glow, then it brings us to my ancestors. I mean, and during the Middle Passage, and decided to keep on and hoping. Gosh,
they decided to live regardless.
Exactly. So, to assume that Africans are lacking, I think it's the opposite.
Yeah,
I think it's the opposite. I think it's, and when you look at now what is going on with COVID, that people are reacting that how come Africa hasn't been, almost with envy and really
we expected a disaster in Africa, so
I think they were hoping for a disaster, because they would love to.
I wasn't hoping. I was hoping there's no disaster, because the disaster would have been my people. But at the same time, it was inevitable. I must confess, in my mind, it was inevitable.
I was worried, but at the same time, now Africa have had to deal with Ebola. Ebola is no joke.
It's no joke, but it has always been up there. For us who are down here, we have yet to experience it.
Exactly, because it's more tropical.
Yeah.
It's dengue, malaria.
Yeah.
So people in the continent not only are spiritually and emotionally resilient, but facing and dealing with all that. Ghana, Nigeria, Togo, all these nations took precautions at the level they have had to take during Ebola. And Ebola comes in cycle. It's not that it's gone forever.
No, it's not. It comes in waves as well.
So then it makes sense. These people are used to dealing with serious dangers. And so it's been hard in South Africa, but the numbers are still under everybody else. And then the thing is that the assumption is that Europe was going to be able to, because that's the mentality that Europe knows, Africa doesn't.
We
Europe
don't.
Europe is the grandparent.
We are savages, remember.
Savages, children, and so on. And then here it flipped. And I mean, it's not that I desire or I think the death of one is more or less than the death.
No.
I know in Spain they had to even set up an ice skating rink to put together all the bodies. And usually the obituaries went from 2 pages to 30 pages. I mean, that's very, very sad. But to have the audacity to question how come it's not happening in Africa, that I find extremely problematic. And also knowing that for many, they wish there was only elephants and giraffes.
It is amazing. I have so many questions that I still haven't even asked you, and we've just reached an hour. I know I want to invite you again at some point, so we can continue this conversation. I don't want to go past 1 hour because then people lose the conversation. There is so much.
We haven't even talked about my work, and my work is completely related.
We haven't even touched anything about you, so I've just realized that we need to do a part 2.
Okay, fine.
All right. So let's close it right here while we're talking about what is happening in America. 230,000 people have died.
Too many
people have died.
Too many, and to these days, after all these hundreds of thousands of people have died, and the relatives were not able to hold their hand, nor were able to have funerals to heal and move and grow out of this, and we don't have a straightforward policy and mechanism that says do this.
Let's end it right here now, Evelyn, and say go vote.
Really, it is it's something. If I would have been told this 10 years ago, I would have not believed it. I would have not believed it. I would have not believed it. And so, with all the resources available here, it's unforgivable.
Unforgivable.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
And I'll reach out to you again, or the team will reach out to try and get part 2, because we haven't even touched this conversation. We haven't even touched your life. We haven't touched even what you are professor for.
Yeah. Well, because it took me this. What I'm today is a journey that has taken several decades.
Yes.
So we talked about how to arrive to Africa and what Africa meant. And so what I do now is from what I learned from my experience in Africa. And that could be part 2.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone who has been listening. I really would love to have Evelyn back on the show again. And I really wanted to know what her thoughts when it comes to Pan-Africanism, what it means, and if we are going in the right direction, especially for the new generation that is coming up. Is the concept of Pan-Africanism addressing their issues today? Thank you so much, and I hope we join us next week again as we have another conversation with our own voices, Africa and Africa in the diaspora. Thank you so much.
Nematombo, Nondo, Mr. Playboy, stand up. Batai Hana, Batai Hana, Batai Hana, Batai Hana. When I'm ready, we say I'm one. What is it? ndizvo matemai vamwe ndisoko mobuye mukono sinyoro shumba
esaigushura baba aiwa uko makata vasha wedu apasa sika usati warasa ridza wakachonjoma pamsoro iva namama ngazvirambe wazama tika kunyora zama ngatsimbise ukama musaputse sezanda une wako nkazana mumwe chete pasana kwitikwitikanana mwenda mberi pajana nadziva tasangana sehama tawanana takabvira kare kuzvitaura ngatichengetei tsika dzedu dzechivanhu vakauya vakazvishora wona ndasandisisiri vanhu uya nehanda nakakuvi chidzoka ndasutudzise vana
mwenda mberi museyamwa otidziva moyo ndizvo matemai vamwe ndisoko mobuye mukono sinyoro shumba tatanopinda Cape Town unotsika hedu jecha tikavasiya vachivenga vakagara pajecha havandidziva